sharp chime from my phone dragged me awake at 6:12 on a rainy Tuesday morning, just as the first streaks of gray light slipped through the curtains of my townhouse in Maple Ridge. The message came from an investment firm I had trusted for more than a decade, and the single sentence on the screen instantly erased every trace of sleep from my mind. Access to your portfolio has been temporarily restricted pending review of recent authorization updates. I stared at the notification for several seconds before opening the company's mobile app, convinced there had to be some mistake hidden behind a technical glitch or routine security measure. Instead, I was greeted by a bright warning banner informing me that administrative authority over my financial holdings had recently changed, and a knot of dread tightened in my chest as I realized I had never approved any such action. The portfolio in question was not just another savings account or retirement fund that could be easily replaced with time and effort. It contained nearly $700,000 left to me by my grandmother, Eleanor Hartwell, who had quietly built a successful publishing company and arranged for the inheritance to remain solely under my control after witnessing years of financial manipulation within our family. I remembered the afternoon she sat beside me in her sunlit library when I was 21 years old, carefully sliding a thick folder across the table while warning me in a voice softer than usual that some people would eventually see my independence as an opportunity instead of an achievement. She had looked directly into my eyes and said, "Lena, one day someone may try to convince you that what belongs to you would be better managed by them, and when that day comes, trust your instincts before you trust their explanations." For 15 years I followed her advice without exception, rarely touching the investments except to pay off my graduate school debt and later purchase the lakeside cottage where I now lived alone with my golden retriever, Cooper. The portfolio represented security, freedom, and the final gift from the one person in my family who had consistently believed in me without expecting anything in return. Instead of contacting the firm immediately, I made the mistake of calling my older brother, Marcus, because despite years of disappointment I still carried a small hope that family loyalty might eventually outweigh selfish ambition. When he answered on the first ring sounding unusually alert for someone who normally slept late, a cold feeling settled over me before a single word had been exchanged. "Lena, I was wondering when you'd call," he said casually, as though discussing weekend plans rather than a frozen financial account worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The confidence in his voice felt rehearsed, and every instinct I possessed warned me that he already knew exactly why I was calling. When I demanded an explanation, Marcus calmly informed me that our parents had recently consulted legal professionals because they believed I had become overwhelmed by work responsibilities and personal stress. He claimed they had acted only out of concern and insisted that temporary financial oversight would help protect me from making poor decisions during what he described as a difficult period in my life. The absurdity of his statement hit me immediately because I was thriving professionally as the director of operations for a regional healthcare network and had received a promotion less than 3 months earlier. My family knew almost nothing about my actual life, yet somehow they had decided I was incapable of managing assets I had successfully controlled for more than a decade. I ended the call without another word and immediately contacted the investment firm, requesting an urgent meeting with the senior compliance officer assigned to my account. The representative on the phone sounded concerned after hearing the details and instructed me to arrive as soon as the office opened while assuring me that additional restrictions would be placed on the account until the matter could be investigated. After dressing in a charcoal business suit and gathering every piece of identification I owned, I drove through steady rain toward the downtown financial district while replaying recent conversations with my family. The more I analyzed the timeline, the more obvious it became that this situation had not appeared overnight but had been carefully planned over many months. My younger sister, Brianna, suddenly came to mind because she and her husband had been struggling financially for years despite receiving repeated assistance from our parents. Only a few months earlier she had casually asked whether I would consider investing in one of her husband's increasingly unrealistic business ventures, and my polite refusal had been met with a bitterness she made little effort to conceal. The compliance officer, a meticulous woman named Rebecca Collins, greeted me in a private conference room shortly after I arrived and immediately displayed several documents on a large monitor. The first file appeared to grant my parents broad authority over my investments through a legal guardianship arrangement, complete with what was supposedly my signature at the bottom of every page. One glance was enough for me to recognize the forgery because the signature lacked a distinctive flourish I had used since high school and contained several spelling inconsistencies that I would never make. Rebecca quietly nodded when I pointed out the discrepancies and explained that her department had already noticed irregularities before I arrived. The second document proved even more disturbing because it contained a psychological evaluation allegedly performed by a specialist claiming I suffered from severe cognitive impairment and required supervision over major financial decisions. The report described behaviors and medical conditions that had absolutely no connection to reality, and the physician listed on the paperwork was someone I had never met or even heard of. Rebecca revealed that her team had attempted to verify the doctor's credentials but discovered inconsistencies in licensing records and contact information that raised immediate concerns. Further investigation showed that the office address belonged to a vacant commercial property, while the phone number connected only to an anonymous voicemail system. As forensic analysts reviewed the electronic files, they uncovered metadata indicating the documents had been created using a personal computer registered to my brother-in-law, Trevor. The revelation removed every remaining doubt from my mind and transformed what had begun as confusion into a clear understanding that multiple family members had coordinated an elaborate attempt to seize control of my inheritance. Rebecca leaned forward and explained that filing a formal fraud complaint would likely trigger both civil and criminal investigations involving anyone connected to the forged paperwork. She emphasized that the consequences could be severe and asked whether I was absolutely certain I wanted to proceed, knowing the people involved were members of my own family. I thought about my grandmother's warning, the years of subtle manipulation, and the countless times my achievements had been treated as resources for others rather than accomplishments to celebrate. Then I looked Rebecca directly in the eye and told her that family relationships did not excuse criminal behavior, especially when trust had been weaponized as a tool for exploitation. Within an hour, financial investigators and local authorities were reviewing evidence while additional safeguards were placed on every account associated with my name. As paperwork continued piling up across the conference table, my phone lit up repeatedly with calls and messages from relatives suddenly eager to discuss matters they had apparently hoped would remain hidden. A detective named Samuel Ortiz arrived to take my statement and listened carefully as I described family dynamics that stretched back decades. After hearing my concerns, he asked whether my parents might appear at the office once they realized their plan was unraveling, and I confidently predicted they would arrive determined to portray themselves as loving caretakers dealing with an unstable daughter. Less than 90 minutes later, my prediction proved accurate when my parents entered the building dressed in expensive clothing and carrying expressions of practiced concern. They immediately began telling reception staff that I was experiencing emotional difficulties and that they were merely trying to protect me from myself. Detective Ortiz calmly separated them for questioning, and inconsistencies emerged almost immediately as each person provided conflicting accounts regarding the origin of the guardianship documents and the circumstances under which they were supposedly signed. Their stories unraveled further when confronted with digital evidence connecting the files to Trevor's computer and communications records linking all 4 participants. By the end of the afternoon, search warrants had been approved, electronic devices had been seized, and formal charges were being prepared against my parents, my sister, and my brother-in-law. Investigators eventually uncovered additional schemes involving forged contracts, altered business agreements, and fraudulent loan applications that extended far beyond my inheritance. The legal process lasted nearly a year, revealing layers of deception far more extensive than anyone initially suspected and exposing a pattern of financial misconduct spanning several states. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence showing deliberate planning, coordinated fraud, identity theft, and repeated attempts to manipulate institutions through fabricated documentation. When sentencing day finally arrived, I sat quietly in the courtroom while the judge described the defendants' actions as calculated betrayals motivated by greed rather than necessity. Substantial prison sentences were imposed, restitution was ordered, and every attempt to portray the crimes as family misunderstandings was firmly rejected by the court. Today I live peacefully in a different city, having transferred my investments to a highly secure institution with multiple layers of authentication and independent oversight. The inheritance remains intact, but more importantly, I finally understand that healthy relationships are built on respect and honesty rather than obligation, guilt, or fear. The greatest lesson I learned was that manipulation rarely begins with dramatic betrayals because it usually starts with small violations that gradually become normalized over time. When someone repeatedly dismisses your boundaries, minimizes your concerns, or insists they know what is best for you despite ignoring your voice, they are revealing exactly who they are long before the major damage occurs. I often think about my grandmother's wisdom and the remarkable clarity with which she recognized dangers I spent years trying to explain away. Her legacy was never really the money she left behind but the confidence she gave me to trust my own judgment when confronted by people determined to undermine it. If this story carries any message worth remembering, it is that protecting yourself is not selfish, documenting the truth is not cruel, and refusing to be exploited is not a betrayal of family values. Real love does not require surrendering your identity, your independence, or your future to people who view your success as something they are entitled to control. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.